On today's episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, is it time to hit the red button? Should we be panicking about Dameon Pierce and John Mechie? And was Blake Fisher a blessing in disguise? We dive into all of that and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, to this Monday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you guys for stopping by. I am your Texans football analyst, John, some sports guy Hickman. On the other side of the screen, Texans Credential Media member, Cody Davis. Welcome back to today and tomorrow, 5 days a week. We are covering your Houston Texans. Thank you to all of our first-time listeners and viewers. Please subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. And thank you to all of our everydayers coming back to listen to Cody and myself talk Texans. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Cody, take us away.
And on this Monday installment of Locked On Texans, John and myself will close out with the YouTube comments because over the last week or so, you guys have been firing it up in the comments, man. We appreciate everything that you guys got to say. So we're going to, of course, highlight the best and the most intriguing. And then finally, after 3 days, we're finally going to talk about whether or not Blake Fisher was a blessing in disguise. And I think it is really important for us to really dive into Blake Fisher now, especially that we had an opportunity to see him play for 2 games. And of course, it still goes back to what we saw from the Houston Texans 20-12 preseason victory against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Thursday, Friday, whatever it was, whichever day it was, or on Friday. But to get this latest installment of Locked On Texans kicked off, speaking about that second preseason game, I think we need to dive a little bit more into the top conversation that not only us here on the Locked On Texans podcast, but a lot of people are talking about whether or not it's time to panic for when you look at John Mechie and Dameon Pierce. And let's start with Dameon Pierce, because I think in the last show we kind of went in on John Mechie in a way to the point a lot of that is probably going to be replicated here. I mean, John, as of right now in the first 2 preseason game, like I said on Friday, it is starting to be a concern, and it's a little bit disappointing because I understand from a standpoint that he is playing with, Davis Mills and Case Keenum. At the same time, I look at it from a standpoint, those first 2 preseason games should have been a way for him to make some type of noise. And through 2 preseason games, he has 2 catches for 11 yards and 4 targets. And, like on Friday, like on last Thursday, like Thursday before last for the Hall of Fame game, there's moments where we are like, where is John Mechie? Even if he's not going out there making catches or getting targets, is he getting open? Is he going out there and getting the extra block or whatever the case might be? Like, he's really not doing nothing to make a name for himself. And when you look at how competitive the back half of this position group is, it's starting to be a little bit concerning. It's something if I bring it to light like that, because John Mechie has been and will always be my guy, and I'm still rooting for him. However, in terms of Dameon Pierce, we had an opportunity to finally get a chance to see him for the very first time, and we all are projecting him, and I still do, to be this team's number 2 running back. However, we can all agree that his performance was disappointing. 4 carries, 4 yards. However, John, I like how you put it when you did more studying with what took place with that offensive line.
Listen, guys, before I even mention Dameon Pierce, I do want to give you guys a few numbers. Of course, just looking at some of the stats from the preseason game, Houston had a total of 61 offensive plays, averaged 4.2 yards per play, 17 first downs. 5 of those first downs came on the ground, 11 came through the air, 38% on the third down efficiency in terms of converting. Average plays per drive, 6.3. Average yards per drive, 21.3. Again, a bulk of that game You didn't get an opportunity to see Davis Mills. And in the second half, you saw more of Tim Boyle and Case Keenum, so take that with a grain of salt. 3 red zone possessions, 6 red zone plays, 1 TD, 1 field goal. But when we look at the topic of discussion right now, Dameon Pierce, I want to say that Chris Reed played in 32 snaps for Houston, and Nick Broker played in 29 snaps for Houston. You look at those snaps, some of the worst snaps we were probably going to see from a Houston Texans offensive lineman. And that leads me into Dameon Pierce. 4 carries. Of those 4 carries, 3 came on the right side. What lineman was on the right side? Chris Reed and Nick Broker. And I went back to look because I was like, man, you know what? We were excited about Dameon Pierce. And if you guys remember Cody and my tone last year, more so my tone in preseason, if you remember, and I caught flack for it, Dameon Pierce was not going to have a good season. Didn't think he was going to rush for 1,000. And that was because of what I was seeing in training camp and during preseason. Just didn't look like the same runner, right? And so now my tone is different. I do see a better Dameon Pierce. I do see a more explosive Dameon Pierce when I'm out there. Cody, can you vouch for that as well?
Mm-hmm.
And he also looks like he's having fun and he's focused. So I'm thinking to myself, we finally got a chance to see him. 4 carries, 4 yards. What went wrong? Was it Dameon Pierce or was it something that he could not control? And ladies and gentlemen, of the 4 plays, 3 of those plays Dameon Pierce could not control. I look at his first run on the right side. He was met at the line of scrimmage, literally contacted at the line of scrimmage, was still able to pick up 2 yards. And 64. Chris Reed was supposed to pick up 41 crashing down. That was the rookie Peyton Wilson, who played very well for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Didn't do the good job of that. He was able to fill that hole, and you're able to meet Dameon Pierce at the line of scrimmage. The second play, toss right, pressure was allowed by number 64, and I want to make sure I get these guys. Nick Broker on the outside, pressure was allowed. Again, Peyton Wilson continuing to make plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, that was a play, and I wrote this in black instead of blue. That was a play of the 4 carries where I put the blame on Dameon Pierce, and I think to myself, you know what, Dameon, this is what they will probably circle and say, Dameon, you got to bounce it on the outside. Because during that play, Nico Collins had his cornerback block. The lane was towards the outside. I think that was more of an outside zone run, and he could have picked up some yards. The pressure was still allowed in the inside, and Wilson was able to meet him, but I put that on Dameon Pierce. Now, this is where we get a little, more tricky. On his third play, again, run to the right, 64 and 62, Nick Broker and Reed, missed blocks on number 99, and again, Peyton Wilson. Nick Broker was high coming off the ball. It was not square, wasn't quick to his spot. And again, you get Dameon Pierce getting hit at the line of scrimmage, and he was able to pick up a yard. This is the worst one that I'm about to tell you guys about. This was a pitch play. This is right after the 1st and 10. Robert Woods pass interference. So you guys can go back and watch it. Houston motions back to the fullback spot, inside pitch, before Dameon Pierce could get the ball in his hands. 95 beat Chris Reed. 51 for the Steelers beat Nick Broker outside. And this is where I look at Blake Fisher, the same criticism that I had for King Green in terms of youth and just getting stronger. Fisher did a very good job with his initial contact, but then that defender was able to throw him out the way. You got Dameon Pierce with 3 guys in his face before he gets back to the line of scrimmage. Those are and he picked up 2 yards on that play. Those are things that as a running back for Dameon Pierce, he cannot control. So I think when we judge Dameon Pierce, you look at maybe Jaws had a better outing, Cam had a better outing. I was kind of confused why Bobby Slow didn't give Dameon Pierce an opportunity to run more to the left side. That play was aimed at the left side, but I think that was a pitch counter play. even still, in that one play alone, he had 3 guys in his face. You can't judge him fairly. You cannot. That's not a fair way to judge Dameon Pierce when you're not getting what you need from everybody else around you. And I think when we look at, is it time to panic for Pierce? Is Cam Akers going to take over as this team's number 2 running back? That's still a possibility. Darray looked good. He scored a touchdown. Jaws looked good in opportunities. But for Pierce, who he had in front of him, didn't give him a chance to survive back there. And he still was able to pick up gains of 2, pick up gains of 1, like he was able to get gains with players in his face, Cody.
Quick question, and I know you probably don't know the answer to it because we don't cover the Steelers, but how many snaps did Willis play? Wilson played because
Wilson played. I have the snap count pulled up right here. Wilson played in, and I think he may end up being a start. 44 snaps. 44 snaps, and was impactful in majority of them.
Okay, so
was a guy that we liked here for Houston to come to Houston.
Okay, so you're looking at 44 snaps. What is that? Majority of the game, and the Texans did not start really doing anything in the rushing attack until that second half. That's when we saw Jordan. That's when we saw Cam. And both of those guys did play better than Dameon Pierce. The reason why I'm bringing that up, and John, I want your honest opinion because I think I know where you're going. But do you think in that sense, what we saw out the Texans rushing attack on Friday, is it also an overreaction? Because you take a look at what Dameon Pierce had to that's what I was getting at, because even
44 snaps from Wilson, 32 with Chris Reed, and 34 from Nick Broker.
And that's what I was getting at, because you literally just changed my thought on what I originally thought about Dameon Pierce. Because remember on Friday before we closed out, I said, well, even though Dameon Pierce played bad, you look at Cam, you look at Jordan, they was better with the hand that they was dealt with. But I never took into consideration on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage, the talent also went down. So now it brings back into light, it was a bit overreaction.
It was an overreaction. And I think 4 carries for Dameon Pierce in one game, and we're overreacting. And I think there is an overreaction with John Mechie with four targets, 2 catches. I think there's an overreaction.
I don't think
we're looking. We are basically looking at best wide receiver 4, at worst wide receiver 5, questioning whether or not he's going to make this team off of 4 targets, none of which came from C.J. Stroud. One drop, but was he creating separation? What was he doing downfield when running backs were breaking loose, if they had an opportunity to break loose, because the offensive line for Houston just played terribly for majority part of their game? What other things was he doing? Because you got to also look at it like this. If I'm getting open, but if I'm not getting the ball, my job was done. The ball just went elsewhere. The ball went to Robert Woods when I was open. It just was, he had to get the ball out quickly because maybe he had to beat a blitz, and maybe my route was due for downfield. Some of these things we got to take into account. And again, it's not like he was going to be this team savior at receiver. We have Mechie. I mean, we have Stephon. We have Tank. We have Nico. At best, he was a wide receiver 4. And Hutchinson is getting more opportunities because maybe that's how it was designed. But 4 targets and 4 carries, we can't overreact to that right now. And it's game 2 of preseason.
I know we gotta go because I don't want to overshadow Blake Fisher again. But the way I just look at it, it makes more sense to go that route for Dameon Pierce versus John Mechie. It's like for me at least, he's not doing anything to really like stand out outside the first 2 weeks of training camp. And I understand at best you're looking at wide receiver number 4, at worst 5 or 6. But now I'm just looking at Noah Brown is making a name for himself during training camp. Robert Woods just had a good game. Xavier Hutchinson been looking good both in the passing and in the run blocking. Same thing with Ben Skoranek as well. Remember, John, after that first preseason game, I came on and show and said, and I talked to it with Sarge and I also talked with you. What we are seeing from Skoranek and Xavier Hutchinson, how much will that change the dynamic of this position group? And one of these guys in that position group may not make it or will be on the outside looking in. And as of right now, we're keeping in the buck. And I hate to say this because it's my guy. I'm looking at John. But on the opposite side of the break, we're going to also transition over and look at Blake Fisher and see if he was a blessing in disguise for this organization.
When you guys are hiring for your small business, you want to make sure that you find quality professionals that are right for the role. You got to check out LinkedIn Jobs, guys. Listen, you don't want to hire somebody you can't trust to come in and do their job, because eventually that looks bad on you. And with LinkedIn, they have the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows small businesses are wearing so many hats and may not have the time or resources to hire. They are constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making it faster and quicker. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Monday's installment of Locked On Texans. So we thought we was going to have an opportunity to see Titus Howard in Friday's preseason game. However, due to the injury scare that took place on Tuesday, we did not see him. And John, I'm not about to overreact to that because, look, as I mentioned before, Titus Howard, even though it's been training camp, going up against Will Anderson Jr., going up against Danielle Hunter, he has looked like the Titus Howard that we all have loved through the first, 4 or 5 years of his career. The only time I think we didn't really see much of Titus Howard was last year, of course, when he was limited to 7 games due to not 1 but 2 major injuries. We haven't seen Laramie Tunsil as of yet, which brings us to this next topic that I'm going to give him his due diligence. Is Blake Fisher actually a blessing in disguise now? Because I remember when the Houston Texans drafted him with their second pick on the 2024 NFL draft.
Pick 59.
We were all dumbfounded at first. Why would you draft a tackle that high? And it was shocking because, John, I remember we was doing our draft preview show, and I think we was doing a topic, what's the one position that we would be shocked if Nick Caserio and Coach DeMeco Ryans, address? We was like the offensive line, especially if you draft a tackle, especially that high. And what do they do after they draft Kamari Lassiter? They went out, drafted Blake Fisher. But after talking to Nick Caserio and Coach DeMeco Ryans, and they talked about, the possibility of him developing and all this other good stuff, it was like, well, okay, that's if, injuries and all this other stuff play out. However, John, here we are going into the 4th week of training camp. I can't believe we're going into a month of training camp already. The regular season is about to start literally like less than a month. We've seen 2 games out of Blake Fisher, some good and some bad. And I am happy to say that every single week I've watched Blake Fisher, he has looked better and better and better. When I say he looks better, I'm not going to look at it from a standpoint of, oh my God, he's ready to start come week 1. But I'm literally watching his progression in real time. I remember the very first time I saw him go up against Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter. He was terrible. He looked god awful. But every single day, I watched this young man put in that work. And it's getting to the point where, look, I still don't think he's going to start come week 1 of the regular season. But if these ongoing injury problems and issues that Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard are having, I do wonder now how much is the draft of Blake Fisher a blessing in disguise. And here's what Bobby Sewell had to say about the growth and progression of Blake Fisher.
Yeah, he's out there competing, just like the rest of the crew. I think we say it endlessly, but we really preach that to the whole group just tirelessly. That's what this is about. It's about going out and every day growing and getting better than you were the day before. And by the time week 1 rolls around, we know we're going to be ready. But in the meantime, all we can do is get better every day. And Blake has done that. In pass pro, he particularly has made some technique adjustments that have helped him for sure. The rushers he's going against have helped him. I know he's had a lot of conversations with them on what they're thinking, what they're doing. And, talking to other old linemen has obviously helped him. And then the run game for us is just very different than where he came from college. But he's been doing a good job. He's bought in, and really right now I'd say he's probably a little further ahead in the run game than the pass game. But he's just got to put his head down and keep growing.
For me, if Blake Fisher becomes a blessing in disguise for Houston, that's a bad sign. Seriously. Between Laramie and Titus, that is nearly $40 million of cap space taken up in between, if not more, those two tackles. Those are the tackles that you are counting on to protect your franchise quarterback, to help with some of the miscommunication, confusion, and just solidify the run game. We have still yet to see Houston be able to effectively run the ball to this point. Training camp aside, training practices aside, in real time, in real games, these two preseason games, Houston has yet to run the ball effectively. What's been a part of that? Bad offensive line play, and not having Titus Howard out there, not having Larry Tunsil out there, which I don't think we're going to see Larry Tunsil this preseason. I think we need to see some Titus Howard for sure. If Blake Fisher becomes that blessing in disguise, well, that means one of those guys missed a significant amount of games. And I'm going to say this, man. I think Houston should have done everything that they possibly could to bring back George Fant. Yep. George Fant is extremely missed. I think he will be extremely missed if something happens. And just looking at the last game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, how much we talked about in his first segment, Nick Broker, Chris Reed, how bad they played. You look at Dameon Pierce being a part of that issue, and it's kind of like if George Fant was out there, maybe we would have gotten a better version of Fant. But back to Blake Fisher, who I think is going to be a good pro for Houston when it's his time. I don't think it's his time right now, which is why I'm still shocked that they selected him at 59th overall when I thought there was value at tackles later in the draft, because there are some things that I think for this team, we all think this is a Super Bowl type of team, contending team. There's some things Blake Fisher needs to work on his game that I don't think this team can afford for him to work on during the year at the expense of getting him out there because he had to fill in because one of the veterans were out. Right? There's a lot of Kenyon Green I see in him at that tackle position. Of course, I know Green is a guard and Fisher's a tackle, but there are some things that he needs to work on. And it's like in 2022, Green could afford to have a year like that because CJ wasn't here, wasn't no real expectations. Lovey was still the head coach. You can afford to have a bad year. Even last year, until we realized this was a team that could, actually make some noise in the AFC South and AFC in general, there were some moments where you could afford to have that. I think there's so much this team cannot afford this year that I don't want to see Blake Fisher be a part of it. I don't think he's a blessing in disguise. I mean, he played better than Nick Broker. I'll say that. No doubt about it. But I don't think we should ever consider him this season a blessing in disguise, because if your best guys are not out there for a team that wants to make the deep run, they hear the noise. They hear the Super Bowl noise. Blake Fisher ain't going to help with that. And that is not a shot to him as a person, as a young man coming up in the league now. I think he will be good, but he just needs to get accustomed to the NFL strength that he's going against. And I think the game against the Steelers was a perfect example of that. He made some good plays, no doubt about it. But when you got to go up against TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, who didn't play, some of the things that you were able to get away with Friday, you won't be able to get away with. Some of the things that were bad Friday will look even worse when you got to go up against guys like that. No, blessing in disguise is not how we should look at it. Maybe a good security blanket, but not a blessing in disguise. If that's a blessing for Houston, then that's when you want to make sure I don't want everybody praying for me. So, I don't want. That's a blessing there. I don't know if your game is at Houston, because it's not a good. I don't think it'll be a good sign. I really don't. Got to dive into the YouTube comments next. So don't go anywhere. We got more Locked On Texans. I definitely want to let you guys know that for your second listen, we appreciate you for making the Locked On Texans your listen for today. But for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this is also a perfect opportunity to let you guys know about eBay Motors. The formula for winning championships, passion, drive, and patience is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance between superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, and more. Whether you're into power, style, or speed, eBay has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guarantee Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP of the road and bring home huge wins. Keep your number one ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit only for U.S. customers. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Before we close out today's show, we're taking a trip over to the YouTube comments. My man David Williams, 912. Davis Mills is having a great preseason this year. I want to shout out my man Noah from Twitter. So last week I said Davis Mills looked like he regressed. I can't lie. Well, that was before the preseason game. I cannot lie. Davis Mills has looked good.
Oh, yeah. And I'm happy for Davis, man, because I just go back to what took place last year when CJ got hurt that whole entire week. We was all expecting the Texans to go with Mills. And, of course, they went with Case Keenum for, several different reasons. And I never forget, man, the look on Davis Mills' face the whole week after that inside the locker room. It was actually kind of sad. And you could tell he was kind of hurt about it. And I think we did have an opportunity to talk to him. I want to say that Wednesday just to see it. And all he said was he just wanted a chance to go out there and compete. And you can tell that he actually took that to heart. I mean, this was an organization like 2 years ago. We was looking at him and saying, if he does X, Y, and Z, maybe he could fill in and be this team's next quarterback for the next X amount of years or whatever. Failed miserably at that. You get CJ, you go into a backup role, and the one time you have an opportunity to start for this organization again, not once, but twice. They went to Case Keenum. But shout out to Davis Mills, man. 2 preseason games in, he has looked really good. I would like to keep him in as a backup, John, but I won't be surprised if something starts brewing up with other teams looking at their quarterback situation and thinking to themselves, maybe we need to make a call down to Houston and see if we could get Davis Mills on the cheap. Because, shout out to Davis Mills, man. I'm liking what I'm seeing for him so far through those first 2 preseason games.
So how do you see this is a 2-part question from Scott Hogan 6891. How do you see the corners? And Michael 7046, number 3 defense kind of low. I think number 1. I want to ask you, Cody, before we close out, if there would be any reasons as to why this team can't be a top 5 defense, what would it be?
If everybody's healthy?
Everybody's healthy.
If everybody's healthy, I'm going to just go back to what I've been saying, the depth of that secondary. Because, look, Kamara Lassiter is going to start opposite of Derek Stingley. But if something happened to either one of those guys, who are you going to run to? One of my favorite songs by Escape. Who you going to run to? Plain and simple. Because Jeff Okudah, he has had moments, but he also has looked terrible at times. Same thing with CJ Henderson. And look, Mike Ford, he needs to be going by late before Saturday's preseason game against the Giants. Please, just leave. Just pack up. Don't even give them an opportunity to cut you. You are back in Houston. They had their night practice on yesterday, which means they're going to practice Monday and Tuesday. So Wednesday is going to be a day off. That just pack your clothes up and leave. Do not come back Thursday. Don't go to the pre game meetings or anything like that. Don't dress up just go home. And that's the cornerbacks. For the safety unit as well, since they are now experimenting with Jalen Petrie playing the nickel, per se.
I thought Petrie looked good.
Yeah, he did. He did. Remember, that was one of my biggest surprises that I had. And I'm really liking what I'm seeing from Petrie. And I definitely think out of all the guys who we believe is going to have a comeback season, I think Petrie is going to have the biggest one. But even when you take a look at the safety unit, okay, Jimmy Ward, if he's healthy, you know what he's going to be able to bring. Kalen Bullock, we could go back and forth whether or not he's going to start week 1. I still don't want to see it. A lot of people want to see it. But if they start in week 1, okay, he deserves it. The young man been balling, I must say. But after Kellen Bullock, once again, who are you going to run to? Like, what are you going to do? MJ Stewart, Eric Murray, all the rest of those guys back there, they haven't really looked good. So it's like, if this defense isn't, in my opinion, top 5, top 3, it's going to be due to depth. And once again, John, I know we say this almost every day. We go back to what Nick Caserio said before the start of training camp. Regardless how good the offseason was, this roster isn't finished. 18, 17, 18, 19 million dollars still in the cap space. This team is really having the opportunity to experiment with a lot of these guys. And they are going to revamp this roster one good time towards the end of this month, right before the regular season start on, what is that, September 8th, September 9th, so well on those lines. So, but look, if everybody stays healthy and they improve the depth, I'm not going to say number 1 defense, but they're definitely going to be top 3. Probably pushing for number 1 because that D-line, man, look, I remember there was one time in the offseason I was like, I don't know why Coach D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio is putting so much resources into this D-line. I see why now. Because this D-line, man, if you have CJ Stroud being frustrated in practice, there was a moment where the D-line was getting at the offense so bad. There was a moment where CJ had to just stop everything and call the whole entire offense in and just like be like, look, everybody just breathe. Like, that's how dominant this D-line has looked. And look, the depth at linebacker, it's a concern too as well. But I don't think it's as concerning as cornerback and safety. By the way, Henry T, we need to make sure we talk about this at some point this week. I think he has looked really good, and I think a second-year leap for him is definitely in the works. But man, that secondary, man, is the reason why if this team does not go at least top 3 in defense this season.
Thank you guys for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, give me a follow on Twitter at John_Hickman12.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, it's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.
Peace.